Hey everyone, today I'm going to go over my rendering process. I've never done one of these before, so I'm not sure if I'm supposed to I don't know how to start the intro, but anyways, so my name is Mocha, and as you all know, I'm an artist here. I've been getting some requests over the years of my process and things, and I finally decided to go for it. So there are many ways to go about rendering a piece. I've actually gone through several different types of rendering styles over the years, as you can see from my old art. But in this video, I will be showing you how I render. Okay, so to begin, you of course need something to color. So here I went ahead and blocked out the entire drawing with one color. I usually go with gray, but you can choose whatever color you like. When you're going to decide what lighting and colors to choose, it's important to keep in mind where the subject is. So here I'm imagining this night lady standing outside in the middle of the day. It's probably 12 p.m. right now, and she's standing or riding a horse in the middle of an open field. She feels like the stoic and brooding type of night, and she's probably thinking of something she must do. I'm thinking that this is probably the calm before the storm, like before a big war breaks out or something. Keeping all of this in mind, we can now move on to colors. Okay, so nowadays, I usually start coloring the background first. The reason for that is because the background will always influence the color of obviously the scene and the subject. I painted a very simple sky in the background for this piece. So as you can see, I just put a little bit of cloud, put a bit of a gradient, of a blue gradient. And once the background is done, I'll go ahead and begin coloring the subject, laying down the flat colors first. I sometimes like using a brush with around 80% opacity to sort of blend the foreground colors in better. I find that this makes them look more cohesive. Think of how oil painters use an underpainting technique to get a warmer or cooler tone. Of course, this gray gives it a more neutral tone, but I do recommend experimenting, like with different base colors such as orange and blue. By choosing orange or blue, you will achieve a certain temperature for your colors. Now I'm just doing some shading. It's very simple shading. Over the years, I've realized that I enjoy a flat but soft look to my pieces. That is why I will do very minimal shading for my base. And I'll also lay down some soft airbrushing. It's so subtle that you might not have even noticed that I did it here. But sometimes, as they say, less is more. So you don't always have to clearly see a color for it to affect the overall piece and how it comes out. Sometimes, like they say, less is more. So subtle details can help your painting a lot. So as you can see right here, I put a little bit of blue, and it kind of desaturated it a little bit from the face because different parts of the face have different temperatures. I'm still learning about that, but I'm trying to implement it more into my paintings and keep it in mind. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, and I'm still learning to paint metal armor, so forgive me if this doesn't look very good. But here, I just tried messing around with the coloring. Of course, referencing a picture of real armor. And please use a lot of reference for things you're not sure the texture of. It will make the biggest difference in your piece. Okay, and now begins the actual rendering process. So when I begin rendering, I'll make a layer on top of everything, on top of the quote-unquote line art layer. In this case, it's just a sketch that I try to draw as cleanly as I can so that it's easier to color and keep as my line art. We'll get away with keeping as my line art. So yeah, I make sure to put the layer on top of the line art layer primarily. I will go in usually with a less opaque flat brush first. And a basic thing that I learned from painters is that And just from observing artists painting, it's always best to start big, then move on to the smaller details after. And what I mean by this is you block in the colors first, the big colors, and you slowly come closer and closer. Like you start out zoomed out, and as you work on it more and more, you're zooming in. I hope that makes sense. So I like to play around the piece by rendering all over the place. However, I do usually begin with the focus of the piece. In this case, her face. I'll work from there and then move on to the outer part, going back and forth from big strokes and small ones. The same rule applies to hair. I go in with a bigger brush first and then go in and do smaller details with a smaller brush. And of course, add textures where they go with a big brush. Usually I just kind of lightly tap certain areas that need a little more texture. Again, you know, trying to be subtle. And when I'm satisfied with the areas that require a bigger brush, I'll go in with a small brush and add details. In this case, I'm making her eyebrows more detailed by adding more hairs and cleaning them up. I'm also adding some touches to the eyes, nose, and lip. I do all this with a small brush. So the next thing I like to do, which you will find in probably all my pieces, is that I like to add stray strands of hair. I'm someone who loves the way messy hair looks. I love bird's nest hair. Oh my god, does that even make sense? I don't even know. So I like to draw most of my characters with messy hair. So that's what I'm kind of doing to this Night Lady. Even though her hair is pretty neatly held up, there are still some shorter hairs that will inevitably end up sticking out, such as her bangs, the hair by the nape of her neck, her sideburns, etc., etc. The world is your oyster. Now, the final step is lighting. So when it comes to lighting, it of course all depends on where the character is. In this case, our knight is standing outside in an open field. However, I can also see maybe a structure of some sort in front of her. I like to find ways to add a shadow on the foreground of the character. The colors that I use for this shadow would be on the side of the color wheel, where the colors are more muted and lighter. Adding shadows to a piece adds a more dramatic feel to a piece, in my opinion. So we begin by making a new layer and setting it to multiply and coloring over the subject. To add a little more dimension, I softly erase parts of the shadow with an airbrush tool. It's a good idea to keep on hand some references of how shadow behaves around the contours of the face. This can eliminate guesswork on where shadows end up, as well as making the piece look especially better. Another thing I like to do is add some local colors, such as the blue from the background around the subject. You can play around with the layer modes to achieve the look you want, but in this case, I put it on overlay and then another one in the glow mode. I like to add a slight golden hue to the piece softly with the glow mode on. The reason for me choosing a golden hue is to contrast the subject a bit from the background. As you can see, she stands out a little better now. And now for the final step in my rendering process, adjustments, aka final touches. Here I decided on changing the hue a bit on the background. I ended up liking how the teal complements the colors of the subject better, so I stuck with that. And when I'm happy with how everything looks, I will select all of the layers the subject and background are in, making sure to turn off the lowest layer, which will usually be your canvas color. And then I merge all the selected layers into a new one. I don't flatten the image because I feel it's important to keep a backup in case you mess up or forget to fix something in the individual layers. Now I'll go in with the liquify tool and move things around a bit. Then I'll duplicate the layer, and to achieve a soft glowy look, I use Gaussian blur on it. And I put the strength high enough until it looks like how I see the world when I don't have my glasses on. Then you just need to lower the opacity some, and you can leave the layer on normal or play around with the mode. In this case, I set the layer to darken and the opacity is at 36%. Then I'm just adding little details like some more shine to the armor and just cleaning it up a bit. To make the colors more cohesive, you can also try gradient maps. I usually add one to my pieces at the very end if I feel the colors aren't getting along, so to speak. So don't be afraid to play around with the gradient maps, or don't be intimidated is what I mean. When you find one you like, you can leave it as is or do what I do and lower the opacity and play with the different layer modes again. I usually end up settling with the layer mode multiply for gradient maps usually. Then all that's left is playing around with the piece if you still feel it needs more adjustments. And that concludes my very first breakdown of my rendering process. I hope you guys enjoyed and that hopefully you learned something. Thank you as always for your support. I'll hopefully be making more of these kind of videos soon if I can get locked in. If you have any questions, feel free to comment them and I'll try to respond to all of them. But yeah, do let me know what you thought of this breakdown. And thank you again and happy holidays and I love you guys. Bye bye.